All right, welcome everybody. Today is study group number 13 for Identity Access Management. Today we're going to cover embedded login, managing sites with contactless users, and also look at a summary of the experience site identity access management features. We'll also do a quiz at the end, and just like always, I want to remind everybody that this study group is based on the information that I've been learning for the past 3 weeks. I summarize it in these slides and I create the questions for us to be able to test our knowledge. But if I get anything wrong or if you see anything that looks confusing, just let me know and we can make sure we figure it out, because this is not a class, it's a study group. And like always, if you have any questions, interrupt me and then we can pause anywhere. Today, we're going to focus on 2 areas that I had questions on my certification. And I had multiple questions about embedded login. I forgot to study about embedded login. So when I took my certification, I'm like, what is that? And it kind of sounded right. So I don't know if I got the questions right or wrong, but I definitely wanted to cover it in our study group because they do ask you about it. So embedded login, what is it? So embedded login is going to give you a way for developers to put an Experience Cloud login form directly into an external application. And so obviously this requires you to use Experience Cloud to be able to use it, because this is how you're going to be able to authorize your users. And depending on how you set it up, you can also it's going to let you authenticate them and also authorize them depending on how you have the connected app set up. It's going to support any login feature you have set up for your site. So if you're using username and password, passwordless login, or social sign-on for your site, it supports any of them. Even if you were to set up something different, like single sign-on or anything else like that, it would support it, because you're really just taking the login form and it becomes an iframe on your site. It does rely on third-party cookies. So you want to make sure that if you're going to use third-party cookies, you're okay with, there's a lot of browsers that block them. And so Salesforce recommends that you not use embedded login and instead you use the web server flow or the user agent flow instead, because it's going to give you more, it's going to be more reliable. And we'll go through some of the gotchas if you use embedded login. It's very easy to set up, but some people will not be able to use it because of their browser settings. So the components for setting up embedded login is you're going to be creating an authentication provider, and this is going to be maybe a social sign-on tool like LinkedIn, Google, Facebook, or you can do OpenID Connect to do your own authentication provider through maybe you're using yahoo.com to log in or your own service. That's when you would use OpenID Connect for your authentication provider. Once you have that set up, you're going to create an experience site, and it only needs to have the login page. It does not need to have any other pages aside from login, logout, password resets, and forgot my password. So it's all of the login pages that you need to set up. You don't need to worry about the rest of the page for headers, navigation, or anything else like that. You are going to have to set up your external application under cross-origin resource sharing, because otherwise, if you don't do that, your website is not going to be able to access the experience site resources. And this relies on the connected app. The connected app is going to allow your external application to use the experience site information, and depending on the settings you use on the connected app, it will give that user access to resources on Salesforce. These are the components you need to use on Salesforce, and when we look at what needs to be done to get it set up, it requires both some admin features and some developer tasks to be done. But you can see it's pretty lightweight when it comes to setup. Again, you're going to configure the authenticated provider. You're going to create the site for the login pages. You're going to brand your login page with your colors, logos, fonts that you want to do, because that way it's going to look like your website. You'll set up the external domain or domains in cross-origin resource sharing. You want to make sure that if you have HTTPS set up, that follows, and any subdomains are also set up. And you're going to create and configure the connected app as the admin. The developer on the external app is going to embed the login metadata that you're going to give them on the website. They're going to provide the JavaScript functions for login and logout. And then they're going to give you the URL for the connected app callback. And that's really it. So it's really straightforward. There's very little coding that goes into it. And it's pretty easy and lightweight to use it. Like I said, the embedded login is an iframe on your application. And so you can create an experience site with the experience builder, and it will not need very much customization. If you want to fully customize it with Visualforce page, you can, but it's not required. So if you look at the flow, because we've been talking a lot about flows during the Identity Access Management study group, your user that's using your application is going to access it. The application is going to request the login form. That is going to be displayed on the application. Once that is displayed, the user will enter their credentials. And again, that could be passwordless login where they're entering a phone or an email, or it could be a username and password or any other kind of login that you've set up for your site. That goes to Salesforce. It's going to validate the credentials and return the result. The application at this point is going to request the access token because this is going to give them access to the resources on Salesforce. And if Salesforce gets a request for the data functionality, it will return in the application, and then finally it goes back to the user. What's important here to see is your user is not aware that they're using a Salesforce feature because it's on your application. So you're taking care of the front end, you're using a bit of experience site, and there's quite a bit going on with Salesforce. Again, it's an iframe on your site, and so because of browser settings, it's possible that you might have some issues here. If your browser settings are not set to allow third-party cookies, then the login button will not display. And so a user might come to your site and give you a complaint saying, I can't see the login button, how am I supposed to authenticate? And the connected app is what's going to handle the authorization and authentication to provide the access token. So any questions about embedded login?
So far, so good.
Good. So now let's talk about contactless user. And this is another one that I forgot to study for my certification, and it came up on, I think, 2 questions for me. And I guessed at it, and I think I guessed these wrong. So what is contactless login? So what you can do is if you have licenses for community and you do not want to assign them and use up your licenses, instead you can create a contactless user. And so you'll create a user record, but there is no contact or account associated to it. Once that user is set up, it can be later upgraded to have an actual license for Experience Cloud, and then you can add the contact. Once you've upgraded it, then you need to keep the user and the contact record in sync. But before that, you're just using what's called a lightweight user directory. This does require the license of external identity license. And so when you create that user, it's just going to have that very basic license that gives them access to authenticate to Salesforce. The benefits are that you do not need to keep the data in sync between the contact because it doesn't exist. You're going to be able to save community license. So once somebody becomes qualified, maybe they're going to make a purchase on your website, then you're going to upgrade them to a community user, but not until they've done that. If they're just browsing or if they've just registered without purchasing anything, they do not need to have a community license. And then if they become inactive, you can downgrade them, which I thought was interesting. You can actually disconnect the user from the contact. And once you do that, they revert back to the original license, and you do not need to keep the contact and the user in sync. So that's contactless user. I think I have one more slide on this. It's a setup. So when you do this, the first thing you're going to do, and you're going to need to do some development, you need to create a custom self-registration handler. And this handler is only going to create the user record because normally if you use the standard registration handler, it creates both the user and the contact record. Once you've created the custom one, you'll be able to enable self-registration on the site. And when you do that, you're going to associate it to your handler. There are no settings in the registration page that says don't create the contact. It is all done in Apex code. Once you have done that, you can either manually or programmatically upgrade and downgrade users. So you can do it via Apex, or you can do it via the UI if you're going to be handling one user at a time. It can also handle bulk users. So if you're uploading users en masse, it can both upgrade and downgrade them through the bulk process. So the way that you are going to upgrade a user, once they've been created, you would create the contact record and you associate to the user. As a separate step, you add the license that they need. Maybe it's community license, maybe it's community plus license. You're going to assign them the profile for the site that they have access to and the role for the data that they can see. That's for upgrading them. Once you've done that, they are consuming a community license. But if they become inactive, you can downgrade them. To downgrade them, it's a bit of a manual step. If you do this manually, to do this separately. First, you're going to disable the user. When you disable the user, it deactivates it. So if they're part of any groups or anything like that, you're going to lose that association. You probably want to disable any welcome emails on the experience site, because if you don't disable this, the next step is to update that deactivated user to give them the external identity license, which is the original license that they had, and then you activate the user. So if they're still, the welcome emails are still enabled, they would get a welcome email again when get the reactivated. All of this can be done through code, and you can see it's multiple steps. You do have to fully deactivate the user first before you can go back and update the license and reactivate the user as a downgraded user. So Contactless users is definitely a good feature for you when you're using Experience site, either for a full community application, or if you're using it as the backend to your external website. I had, like I said, at least 2 questions on this. One of them, it might have been the wrong answer, and one of them, it was the right answer. So you want to make sure you understand the Contactless user, because normally for an Experience site, you set up the user, the contact, and the account, but that is not required. Questions on this one?
Except for the iframe, everything else you need to do is on the experience side. Am I correct?
Both. So Contactless user will work both on the Experience site and on your external application,
Okay.
because you can use Experience Cloud as your identity provider for your external application and never use the rest of communities or Experience site, or you can use the whole thing on there.
Okay.
So now we're going to go to just some broader Experience site identity access management features. And some of these we've covered in the past, and some of these we have not. So the ones that I have here, we're going to start with an Experience site. And if any of you have done anything with Experience Cloud, and if I recall, Lori is actually certified in Experience Cloud, you're able to set up your login, logout, forgot, and reset password pages. For all of these, you can set either the default page that comes with the site, or you can build your own Experience Builder site that gives a little more control over the fields that are going to show up in the branding. Or if you want full control over the whole thing for all of these pages, you can use Visualforce. When you use Visualforce, it's going to give you control over the whole thing, the look and feel, the functionality beneath it, and all those things. So definitely this is the most development heavy and the most control that you can have. For the Visualforce options, you can also use the Apex login controller. So if you want to have different behavior for upgrading users, downgrading users, maybe giving them access to special permission sets, you can do that through the Apex login controller. And the other thing is with Experience site, and again, I did not know this until this week, you're able to extend the session timeout for partners and customers up to 7 days of inactivity. If they become active again within that 7 days, they do not need to log back in, but beyond 7 days, that would be the maximum you can take it to, and they have to log back in again. Everything else in Salesforce, it's a much shorter window, and so I was surprised this was 7 days. Branding your identity experience. Again, with Experience site, you can change the backgrounds, the buttons, the colors, the font, and you can also insert logos. Depending on the template that you use, you have a little bit different branding experience that you can apply to it, but it's fairly flexible. You can also set features, so you can change the branding based on the user that's logging in. Maybe you have partners that are different levels. One of them is a standard partner, and another one is a gold partner or a platinum partner. Each one of those can have a different login experience by using what's called an experience ID, which is EXP ID is what you pass through. So in the link that you send, maybe you send an email to the partner, or you have it on your application, the button that has the login experience would have EXP ID, and whatever you name that identifier, it will say this is the standard partner or this is the gold partner, and it can change both the look and feel and also the form that they get. So that's using dynamic URLs. The third one is you can use the experience site as really just identity access management as a backend application to your external application. And when you do that, you use what are called headless identity APIs. And we went through this, I want to say in session 11, when we talked about, actually both session 11 and session 12, when we talked about you can use it for the login experience. So your user, it's a little bit like embedded login, except that you're not relying on third-party cookies. It is being developed on your website directly. And when they enter the username and password, you are passing that information through Salesforce to the APIs to get that person authenticated and then authorized depending on the permissions that you have set. You can also use the forgot password headless API that when they forget their password, if your user, if your application is already connected to Salesforce and authorized, you're able to use that particular flow to reset their password. And that reset password works a lot like your standard Salesforce reset password. You put in the customer identifier. Once you identify the customer, they get sent a verification code to their email address. And their email, they'll select the link, they'll click on the link, they'll enter the code, and then they enter a password. If the password is correct and it meets the Salesforce password rules, then they're able to update the password and proceed. If it does not follow the password policies, you have up to 5 attempts with that one verification code before you have to get another verification code. So the user might enter the wrong password once or twice, and Salesforce lets you reuse that same verification code. But again, that's a headless way. So what that lets you do is you have full control of your front-end experience on your mobile app or your website, but you're still using Salesforce for all of the identity access management features. So those are 3 really high level. I didn't go into a lot of the details for experience site because it's not really part of identity access management and it's not part of the certification. They do ask you about how you're going to handle login, logout, reset passwords on the experience site and how to manage licenses. So you do want to know the difference between the embedded login, the contactless user, and standard users and how you can apply those licenses. Questions there? So there's a couple additional features that we're not going to cover too much today because we've covered them in past sessions. You do want to be very familiar with social sign-on or sign-on for communities. This is where you're going to either work with your individual identity provider and you'll use SAML for single sign-on, or you're going to set up one of those social sites with OpenID Connect. There's, I think, 7 or 8 of them that out of the box, they let you connect to them very easily. And you can use Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, Microsoft, Twitter, and I'm sure I'm forgetting 1 or 2, that all you have to do is in about 3 or 4 clicks, you set it up as an admin, and then you can use Google to let users log into your application, which is pretty cool, or your experience site. If you have a provider that's not already set up, you can create your own with OpenID Connect. You do want to have a good understanding of which ones are automatically available in Salesforce. I did have a question about, I want to say Twitter versus, I forget the other one, which one I would want to use with the least amount of setup. And so you want to know the ones that are available out of the box. And I'm logging in really quick to one of my orgs. I can show you that page. Nope, it's not OpenID Connect in settings. What is it? This is the other settings. Here. Under OAuth providers, here's the list of the ones that are, and there's more than, like I said, I couldn't remember all of them, but they did ask me a question about Twitter and something else that I can connect to. So all of these, if I were to select Twitter, I'm done. Everything that I need to do here is already done. Once I add Twitter to my experience site, people would be able to log into my experience site with Twitter without me doing anything else, which is pretty nice. And the same thing is true for the other auth providers. So again, be familiar with this list because they might ask you a question about what if I use Yahoo versus Twitter? What do I need to do when I use Yahoo versus Twitter? And you would need to know that for Yahoo, you would set up an OpenID Connect auth provider, set up your own information because then Yahoo is going to give you the details to set it up. Or if you're using something like Twitter or Facebook, it just comes out of the box. I didn't know they had added Apple. They've added someone since I had not realized. So that is single sign-on for communities. And then passwordless login we covered during study session number 7. This is where on your experience site, you set up a discovery login page. You set whether users can enter an email address or a phone. And depending on what you selected, the user can enter that information. Salesforce will send a verification code either to the email or to the phone. And once the user enters that code, they're authenticated. They do not need to enter a password. If you send verification codes via SMS, you have to purchase identity verification credits. This was in my certification. They want you to know that for SMS, there's an extra cost to it. I don't remember the question, but the answer was you need to purchase identity verification credits. So that's additional community features. Any questions on these? All right. So now let's do our quiz. And so I am going to paste the quiz on chat. We're going to present this. And if you want to go to it, all of the questions we're going to ask right now were part of everything that I just covered. And so definitely this is a game of memory because I know I went through it really fast. And I think I have maybe 12 or 13 questions. So all of the questions include a link to the source of the information. So if we have any questions as to why I created the question and those answers, we can look at it. And you're welcome to peek when you're taking the question, but I encourage you to answer the question first. So now I'm going to join you guys actually. If you want to sign in, I'm going to do it on another screen so you guys can't see my answers and cheat. All right, we're going to start the quiz. I think we have everybody in. 13 questions today. So what are the components for setting up embedded login? Select 4 answers.
I'm not sure that I remember this.
It was the first slide, the first section that we were talking about. Got about 20 seconds left. So the answers are your authentication provider, your experience site, course for the website that you're going to be accessing the login page from, and a connected app. You do not need to set up login flows. You could, it supports them, but they're not required. And you do not use name credentials at all for embedded login. You just use the connected app. Questions?
I missed one.
Good job. One's not bad. All right, let's go to the next question. And I forgot to say this, and some of you guys know, the faster you answer, the more points you get. Question 2. The project needs to support identifying customers by phone number and send an SMS message with a verification code. What considerations should an identity architect share? Select 3 answers.
I submitted prematurely.
Well, if you missed one of the answers, you'd get 0 points. They don't do partial credit.
I did not notice the select 3.
Just like a certification. Well, certification tells you when you're missing one, but you do not get partial credit. And I didn't mention this, so if you missed this, I wouldn't blame you. So you're going to implement password login because you're logging in with SMS message. It does require the purchase of the verification credits. And I forgot to mention this. Salesforce recommends that you encourage people to sign on with their email as well in case they need to do password recovery. And technically, this is correct. I don't know who answered implement embedded login, but you could implement embedded login because it would support it. But then you have other challenges. So you know how certifications give you the best answers? This one would fall off because it's not a best answer. But like that's not actually wrong. It's just not the best answer. Any questions? Let's go to the next question. Question 3. Once upgraded, a contactless may not be upgraded. I meant may not be downgraded. And correct. And sorry for my typo. I'll fix it before I publish the quiz. But once upgraded, it can be downgraded. So this is false. Question 4. Contactless users may be upgraded and downgraded manually and via Apex. Select one answer.
I'm guessing.
50-50. And so true. You can both upgrade and downgrade manually via Apex and also via bulk jobs. And I wish Salesforce had true and false questions on their certifications, but they don't. They're so fun to learn with them. Next question. Oh, scores. Wendy, you're doing well. Question 5. What license is required to use contactless user? Select one answer. External identity license, because that's required for contactless. To upgrade them, then you have to have a community license, but it's not community plus. It could be any community license. These do come at extra cost, by the way. It's not really clear in the documentation, but basically to use a contactless user, you have to buy a lighter license to save money. So I don't know what the cost difference is. I've never purchased these before. But I know the community and community plus licenses can be quite expensive. All right, next question. Question 6. The company has purchased community licenses and would like to maximize the use of licenses. How can you manage license allocations? Select 3 answers.
I thought so. Deactivate will be wrong because you said that 7 days, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so yep. You want to implement contactless user, you want to downgrade inactive users and upgrade qualified users, because that way you're only using community licenses when you need to.
That's why you
Yeah,
should never change your first guess.
yes. Sometimes your gut is right.
I was like, I had that upgrade qualified users, and I was like, wait, is it deactivate?
Well,
Oh,
3
well,
of you selected deactivate because deactivating a user when a session becomes inactive would, when they came back, they would not be able to log in. So they wouldn't even, you wouldn't be able to upgrade or downgrade them because now they're deactivated. Technically that does save you money, but it would be a horrible user experience.
it's the email that we have to like um disable or something.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome
Yep.
email.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Next question, question 7. Almost halfway there. Contactless user requires a custom self-registration handler. True or false? True. Nice job. Next question. Question 8. The project has a requirement to display different branding for different types of partners. How would an architect proceed to implement a solution? Select 2 answers. And so dynamic URLs, you want to implement those with the EXP ID, and you want to pass through that EXP ID as a parameter on to give the context attributes to your experience site. The dynamic URLs are not available on the default page, which is why this one is wrong. It's only available on if you use experience build pages and visual force pages on experience site. And I don't think I said that during the session, so sorry about that. But default pages do not support it. You would not want to create separate sites for each partner because that would be double the maintenance or more, depending on how many types of partners you have. And if you can do this with either the experience ID, EXP ID, or audiences in Experience Cloud, that's way more efficient. I did have a question about audiences and logins. And so I don't remember what I answered, if I got it right or wrong, but there was a question around using dynamic URLs for different kinds of customers on one community site. Questions?
But you can also create using Visual Force, and because implement dynamic URL is not available in default page, we cannot select this one, right? But in Experience Cloud page and Visual Force page, it is there, right? So because, did you get my question? Sorry.
No, I don't think so. Can you ask again?
Okay, sorry. Because it's implement dynamic URL is not available on default pages. If our question was if the choices were apart from the default pages, then we could select experience build page and Visual Force. Am I correct?
Yes,
Or
you're
no?
correct. No,
Okay.
you're correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Good question. Next one, question 9. What is a contactless user? Select one answer. And so it's a user without a contact. And for me, in my certification, it was one of the answers. And I remember seeing it and thinking, huh, is that thing real? Now I know that it's real because I forgot to study it when I was going through my preparation for my certification. But definitely, it's interesting that let you do that because it is much easier to maintain the user record than to have to maintain all of the records with it. And the license that it has is going to be the external identity license, so it does still get a license. Next question. See, Lori, I told you you'd do great.
That's surprising.
You were worried about it on LinkedIn. I'm like, no, we cover all the content in the session. All right, a few more questions to go. Question 10. Marketing would like to reduce the number of times a partner and community user has to log in. How long can you extend a session timeout for inactive users? Select one answer. Seven days. And so for experience sites, it can go up to 7 days. For your, I actually couldn't remember. What is the standard timeout session for sessions? Does anybody remember on Salesforce? Is it up to 2 hours?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was surprised that experience sites go multiple days and much less a week. So I'm like,
Because you want the customers to come back.
And you want to reduce friction, so you don't want them to have to log in multiple times. You do this on their profile. So there's a profile that you create for your partners and your customers. That profile gets added to the experience site because that's how they get access to one site versus another. And on the profile, that's where you set the session policies, and that could be up to 7 days. Now they've increased it. So now session timeout settings for a Salesforce org is up to 24 hours. So I think best practice is 2 hours or less, but you can go all the way to 24 hours. I just took a peek because I was
Did you say
curious.
the 24 hours is now the default?
And it's
No,
not the
I
default
think
for
minimum, right? Minimum is 2 hours, right?
Minimum
Oh,
is
1
2
hour
No.
hours.
it says there. Okay.
for your
15 minutes.
Salesforce. Yeah, for your Salesforce users, not for the experience site, but for your standard Salesforce users.
Yeah.
The best practice is 2 hours or less, and you can go as little as 15 minutes and as much as 24 hours. So for a regular Salesforce user, it's a much shorter window. For experience sites, 7 days. Next question, question 11. What are features of embedded login? Select 3 answers.
This is hard. Um,
Yes, just by mistake, even if you select the wrong answer, you cannot correct it.
I know, right? Once you submit it, you've submitted it.
I guess correctly.
And so you add it as an iframe to your external app. It does support whatever login methods you put into your site, including username, password, social, discovery login. Discovery login is the same as passwordless login. It relies on third-party cookies. All right. Well, we have 2 questions to go. Security has requested to not use third-party cookies for the external application login process. What other option do you have to manage the process? Select to answer.
Just gonna guess.
And so you want to remember headless. So whenever you're doing something on your application, because what you're going to recommend is basically embedded login requires third-party cookies, so you can't do embedded login. Custom Apex login handler, it doesn't tell you where it's being done, but a headless API is going to let you control your front end functionality all on your own or in your application. And you can use the headless APIs to do all of the authentication and authorization of your users. And headless is basically saying that there's a computer program that you can connect to with the APIs to do what you need to do with them.
I thought the headless forgot password was a trick question.
Yes. Yeah.
Nope. There's 2 APIs, one for login and one for headless. And what they recommend is that your application uses OAuth, server-to-server communication, because once you do that to your user, it's all transparent. There's a way to use headless login API that uses the user agent flow, but it's not as clean to your user because they still have to go to Salesforce login, authorize, and then go back to their application. And that's not very clean. But if you do the server-to-server integration from your application into Salesforce, it's all transparent to them. They always stay on your external application, and they never see Salesforce at all. So that's when you want to use the Salesforce features without exposing the Salesforce application. All right. Any questions? One more question, and then we'll see who wins. Some users are reporting they cannot see the login button on the external application. What are some potential causes? Select to answer.
2 answers.
Nice job. So the user does not allow third-party cookies, and the browser is not supported. And sometimes you know the answer because the other ones are completely wrong, right? So any questions? All right. Let's see if Lori kept the lead. Oh, so close. Lori, you kept the lead.
Yeah, congrats.
Nice.
Your first time session, right? Very good.
Yes, but I think Lori cheated a little bit because Lori has her community experience cloud certification. So I don't know how much any of this is in that certification.
Actually, when I was studying for that, I had a hard time grasping that headless API, etc. Like I think there was a table about that, and I still could not wrap my head around it. But this was fun.
Good. I'm glad you had fun. I am going to stop recording our session. Let's see. Stop recording.